Good morning, wonderful students. Unfortunately, here I am again, sending you a recording for the lesson. My apologies once again for missing even more class time. You may have read within the Schoology posting, but I hurt my back. Apparently, this is a sort of indirect side effect for the surgery that I had before. I am feeling much, much better. Just 2 days ago, I wouldn't be able to sit in the chair, but I'm not quite ready to be able to come back to school. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, and fingers crossed, I'll be back in on Thursday. So this lesson here that I'm posting for you, this is going to be about thematic stems that we find within the lottery. So before I go any further, I want to show you where to find this information within your Schoology page. So let me pull it up for you really quick. So if we go into our Schoology page here, and this is sort of the cover page. Now, if you're not with my 5th block class, if you're with another class, it's the same concept. If you simply go into the lottery, you're going to see all the different sources that we've used before, resources that we used before. These are the two that we're interested in here. This one says the lottery theme stems, and then this one here says graphic organizers for themes. So what I'm going to pull up for you first is the PowerPoint with the theme stems. That way you can sort of see what it is that I'm going to be sharing with you. Actually, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to pull up the Microsoft Word document. That way you can sort of see what you're trying to create here. So let me make this just a little bit bigger for you. And we'll make this, I don't know, how about 125? That should be big enough. So if we take a look at this, there are, first of all, 3 pages. 1 page for each thematic idea that I want you to break down. The top portion here says thematic stem. I'm going to give those to you, and they'll be on the PowerPoint. And then the second line here, I'm asking you a question about what the author has to say about that thematic stem. So let's say that the thematic stem that we're talking about here is, I don't know, human nature. All you would need to do is type in that phrase, human nature. Now, what you would do over here, when I ask you what the author is saying about human nature, well, maybe the author is saying that humanity is, if I can spell it correctly, humanity is cool, right? Humanity is hypocritical. What else can we say about humanity? Humanity is indifferent toward the suffering. Lots of things that we can say about this. Now, this next step here, this is where the real work begins. So you're not only telling me what Shirley Jackson is saying about humanity or about the other 2 theme stems, but now you're going to provide me evidence to support that. That evidence could be a medley of things here. I don't need one of each within this box, but it could be dialogue, meaning what the characters themselves are saying. It could be descriptions, of course, of what the characters are actually doing, or it could be simply the narrative description of what is going on. I'm going to need 3 pieces of evidence here. 1, 2, 3, and don't forget the citation also. Remember, a citation, you're going to have to put in parentheses. You'll have to put the author's last name as well as the page number. Page 2 is exactly the same, and page 3 is exactly the same also. But what we'll do is we will do page 1 together. So first of all, I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to bring up for you the PowerPoint presentation that I have here. Let's make it so that it is in a presentation mode. There you go. So the lottery thematic stem. So again, this is available on the lottery folder within your Schoology site. So there's 3 thematic stems that I want you to take a look at. The first one we already talked about briefly, human nature. And the second one is persecution, and the third one is tradition. Before I move specifically into human nature, I want to talk broadly about all 3 of them. That way you sort of get an idea here. So first of all, human nature. As we remarked, there's lots of things that we can say about human nature. We can talk about how people are cruel. We can talk about how they're hypocritical. We can talk about how within the lottery they're followers. And we can talk about just a variety of things here in which we see how human nature sort of fails Tessie, if you will. Or, of course, she's part of the whole system too. Talking about how they're cruel, it's very obvious, of course, the cruel that it's inflicted upon Tessie in terms of how just we have the whole lottery. A person is decided to be stoned. They choose a person to be stoned, And then when that person pulls that black mark and then they're stoned, no one shows any sort of compassion towards that individual. No one tries to stop it. No one cares. They're more interested in the actual stoning itself. So if you remember on the last page of the lottery, one thing that Shirley Jackson says that of all the traditions, et cetera, they don't follow, they don't remember. The one thing they do remember is the stones. And that says a lot about them. In terms of the hypocrisy, we can make an argument that Tess is the same way here, where it suddenly becomes not fair when she is the one who draws the black spot. Suddenly the game is rigged when she's the one who's going to be stoned. Suddenly it matters what we do to one another when she's going to be one who is being inflicted with this awful, awful punishment that goes on here. Likewise, the townspeople are really hypocritical on a variety of levels there. Not only do they say things like, be a fair sport, Tassie, not only are they sort of very friendly towards her until she is marked for stoning. So we have those examples of sort of hypocritical nature of individuals smiling on one side and then sort of grinning evilly on the other side, if you will. And then the idea that we're followers, that we're sort of sheep in a variety of ways here. If you recall, we had this wonderful conversation. Well, we didn't have the conversation, but there was a wonderful conversation within the story of the lottery, where a handful of people brought up the fact that the lottery is something that other towns don't follow anymore. So in other words, these individuals didn't want to do this anymore. These individuals might have realized that maybe something like this shouldn't be done. Yet Old Man Warner, he sort of shuts everybody down. He talks about how the lottery is a tradition that they need to keep following, that he's done it for 77 years. And he's complaining about how people aren't the way they used to be. So he's all about tradition, of course. And instead of the other individuals saying, no, we should stop this, let's not do this anymore, they listen to Old Man Warner and they follow sort of the pack, if you will. They don't think on an individual level. Now, all these things with regards to human nature that we see within the lottery, we also see, unfortunately, within real life. There are many, many examples in real life in which people are cruel, in which people are hypocrites, in which people follow the masses instead of following their conscience. We won't talk about those in particularly today, however. So let's move on to, so again, there were three of them that we were going to look at. Let's move on to persecution. So I have this, we'll take a look at it in a second, all that textual evidence to sort of show you where to put it. So the thing about persecution that we see within the lottery, it's very, very random. It doesn't matter who the people are. If they draw that black dot, they're going to be stoned to death. And so what happens is society sort of randomly attributes this black dot to a person to get stoned. It's really what's coming on here, right? And we see this concept today. Remember how we talk about applying thematic ideas to real life? We see this idea today also. We see this idea where individuals are randomly chosen by society to have sort of a black mark or a black dot on them. Well, what is the random black dot that they might have? Well, it could be their religion society doesn't like, right? It could be their country of origin society doesn't like. It could be their skin color that society doesn't like. It could be just their physical appearance outside of skin color that society doesn't like. It could be their socioeconomic status that society doesn't like, their gender, their identity, and the list goes on and on and on, where society sort of has us draw from this lottery box, if you will. And then if you have a slip of paper with a black dot that just happens to be one of these random things that society says, we got to persecute for you, we got to persecute you, well, then we do, meaning we as a society do persecute these individuals. Stones aren't necessarily thrown at individuals, of course, but there's different ways in which they're persecuted, primarily through different laws that are set up, laws that either restrict an individual's physical freedom, or that may restrict somebody economically, or in certain cases restrict individuals on a religious level here. So this is what we mean when we say persecution, how persecution many times is randomly afflicted on individuals here. Notice too, with both of them that we've talked about, with human nature, we're not simply saying human nature is the theme, but rather we're talking about what does Shirley Jackson say about human nature. When we talk about persecution, persecution isn't the theme, it's about what does Shirley Jackson say about persecution. The last one is tradition, and this is probably the easiest of them. This idea of following tradition blindly can be very, very dangerous. Well, within the story, We see them following blindly. We see them listening to Old Man Warner, among other things. We see them sort of participating in this tradition of the lottery, even though they clearly don't want to. It's very clear by the way they respond to being near the stones. It's very clear the way they don't really want to be a part of this when each person has to go up to get a slip of paper. Everyone's very sort of grim. And it's not until the end when they are quote unquote safe that they sort of celebrate, for lack of a better word, this tradition here. And this is where, of course, we get into the hypocrisy of human nature. And then they stone Tessa. And so when we look at this idea of tradition being blind, or rather us following tradition blindly being something very dangerous, we see this, of course, not just within the story of the lottery, but we also see this in our society at large. There are many traditions that we follow blindly, right? Now, some, it doesn't really make a difference, right? It doesn't make a difference if you blindly follow the tradition of maybe during a certain holiday, you have a certain type of food. That's perfectly fine. Or if you watch a football game, then you wear a certain jersey, or again, maybe you eat a certain type of food, or you sit in a certain place on the couch, whatever. Those traditions, even if we are blindly following them, those are harmless. They don't do any damage. But there are other traditions that we follow that might be damaging to our society. I mean, just thinking on a political level, the fact that we only have two real political parties here. We have the Democrats and then we have the Republicans. How much different would our society be if we broke that tradition and we allowed legitimately a third Democratic, or not Democratic, rather a third political party into the system? Or think about the way the votes are set up here. Think about how individuals, your individual popular vote doesn't really count. It's more about the electorate that counts, electoral votes that counts. And how as a result that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of votes really don't make a difference. Well, we hold on to the electoral college because of tradition. We only have two political parties because of tradition. Think of different laws that we have set up. Laws of if you do X, then you're going to get X amount of punishment because of a crime. Or think about our schooling system, the way it's set up, traditionally speaking, where you have to be in school at 7:25 and you have to leave at 2:15. That's your school day. And you do it from September through through June. We do these things because of tradition. Traditions may be necessary then, but they've become traditions now. Is that really the best way to learn? So we could go on and on and on about different aspects of society, but we're not going to do that, of course, right now. Instead, what I want you to do is delve into the text of the lottery and find some evidence that demonstrates how tradition being followed blindly, or human nature, maybe that it's cruel or that's hypocritical or that it's about following the masses. Find me information from text there, or how persecution can be very, very random, where you don't necessarily deserve, quote unquote, to be persecuted. And again, find me evidence within the lottery. So as I said, we'll do the first one here, human nature. And so I put up a bunch of quotes. There's a lot more evidence than this, but I just want to sort of show you how you would just collect this evidence and you would sort of fill it out in the card. So if you take a look on page 31, I pulled two pieces of textual evidence that support this idea that human nature can be cruel, or maybe human nature, we're hypocrites or we're followers, depending on how you sort of look at it. So it says, you didn't give him enough time enough to take any paper he wanted. I saw you, it wasn't fair. This course is Tessie talking. This, I would argue, would fall under the idea of we're hypocrites as within human nature. Be a good sport, Tessie, Mrs. Delacroix recalled. And Mrs. Graves said, all of us took the same chance. We can slide this, of course, into hypocrisy too, because we wonder how they would have responded if they were the ones who drew the slip of paper. Or if you want, you can sort of put this in that pocket of human nature being cruel, how indifferent they are to what's going to happen to Tessie and her family. A girl whispered, I hope it's not Nancy. Again, this sort of strange cruelty, and also the strange manner of sort of following the masses. What if it was Nancy who drew the slip of paper? I guarantee that girl would still stone Nancy to death. Bill Hutchinson went over to his wife and forced a slip of paper out of her hand. I think this is a perfect example of the husband so just following what the masses tell him to do. He doesn't care that this is his wife who's going to possibly get stoned. He doesn't care if it's going to be him. He doesn't care if it's going to be his kids. He doesn't care about any of those things. In this case here, it's the slip that she had that's going to have the black dot. You can also make an argument this is a good piece of textual evidence to support that human nature were cruel, that were indifferent to the punishment of others. Although the villagers had forgotten the ritual and lost the original black box, they still remembered to use stones. This certainly falls in that category of human nature, that we are cruel. So of all the pieces of tradition that there could be, the one thing that they remember is how to kill people. I think that speaks volumes about who these individuals are. The children had stones already, and someone gave little Davy Hutchinson a few pebbles. Again, this falls on that neat category of being cruel. They're literally giving the child of Tassie stones to kill his own mother. It isn't fair, it isn't right, Mrs. Hutchinson screamed, and then they were upon her. Lots of different categories we can apply this to. We can put this into human nature being cruel. We can take a look at hypocrisy, because this idea that Tassie saying it's not fair, it's not fair. So we can do all these different things here. So then what do we do here? Let me stop sharing this. So again, as I mentioned, what you're supposed to do here is you're supposed to fill out your sheet. Let me see if I can find it again. I think this is it right here. Yes. So why don't we pull up some of the evidence in here? I'm going to fill this out for you, and then you'll have one of these done. So what we're looking at here is, I'm just going to focus on, I don't know, the cruelty. I think that one's pretty simple. I think cruelty is an easy one to sort of find here. Humanity is cruel. It's a very simple thematic idea. So I'm going to go to so what I'm going to do here, I'm actually just going to pull up this. I'm going to look at the ones, I'm going to find the ones that I think are good for, oops, stop sharing on me. Let me try opening that again. I'm going to take a look at the ones that I think are good for cruelty here. Be a good sport. Let's see. Girl whispers, not her. Forced to slip of paper. Let's see. I like this one here. So I know there's going to be 3 that I need here. So I'm going to do this one here. And then this one here where they gave a little Dave. I think that's horrifying. Right? Isn't fair. And then they were upon her. You know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to jump over here. That way we have it on a different page. I don't want them all taken from 34. So we'll start with the very top one here. Be a good sport. So let me share this document again for you that we're writing on here. I'm just going to paste it in for myself. All right. So because it's coming from PowerPoint, it might be a little funky. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to write a little descriptions for my own self here, all right, about the cruelty. These are supposed to be friends. That's it. However, they show no, I don't know, empathy or sympathy. Additionally, we know that eventually you will be one of the first stone. So I misspelled this. I forgot to put that on there. So now let's take a look at the next quote that I'm going to put on there. So all I'm going to do here, I'm going to jump back over to my PowerPoint. I'm just going to choose the second one. I copied that. Let's jump over here. Let's paste it. It's the same concept. So again, we're talking about the cruelty. All the villagers had forgotten the ritual and lost the original box. They still remembered to use the stone. The rituals described by Shirley Jackson range from singing to using wood chips. None of these rituals was any physical. However, like the stones, they were no. It's interesting that the ritual caused people to die in a cruel way. The only ritual villagers kept 100%. Not a great description, but I think it's good enough. Again, this is only a draft that we're using here. I sort of got caught up in my words here. Let's take a look at one more. So again, I'm just going to jump over to our PowerPoint. I'm just going to use the very last one that I sort of bolded. I think this is, of course, perhaps one of the most obvious examples of the cruelty. So again, I'm just going to paste it right in here. So what do I want to say about this? That the villagers handed these child stones, the expectation of him helping to kill his mother. Change this because I'm going to end up with a fragment here. Demonstrated level cruelty. Each participant. Something like that. We'll fix my typo right here. And so that's really all you have to do. Now, obviously, for the next ones that you'll have to do, I am only providing you with the type of theme, in this case, the randomness of persecution or blindly following tradition. But that's really all you have to do is simply go into that document that I provided for you. Tell me what the theme stem is, which I provided for you. Tell me what Shirley Jackson is saying about that particular theme stem. And then last but not least, give me some evidence with the citations that support what it is that you say that Shirley Jackson is trying to communicate to us about that theme. I hope to see you very, very soon, my awesome students. Again, my apologies for not being in. To be perfectly honest, I'm quite embarrassed about it. This is a lot of days that I've missed within this first marking period. Hopefully the second marking period will go a lot smoother. Until then, I'll talk to you later. Bye now.